Thank you so much for being here, everybody. These meetings are always so much fun, and we always learn so much. David Kunhardt, our guest speaker, had a long career in creating community development partnerships. Then he entered the solar industry in 2007 in California, where he created partnerships to save money for schools and cities for 13 years until retiring to Maine in 2021. He is on the board of Piper Shore's Life Care Retirement Community in Scarborough, Maine, one of our chapters, and he chairs the board of a land trust in New Hampshire. He is the VP of the board of Maine's Citizens Action for Democracy, and he volunteers with Citizens Climate Lobby, where he is co-liaison to Independent Senator Angus King. So David, welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to speak to us, and I know we're going to learn a ton. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for the honor of the invitation. I really do appreciate this. I hope that by the end of this, you will have felt a little bit, let's say, better informed on the topic of greenhouse gas removal and carbon dioxide removal. And I also hope that you will catch some of the enthusiasm and optimism that actual solutions to climate change can imbue. As I'm not going to talk about the disasters of climate change, I think all of us are aware of that in this wonderful community of seniors sensitive to sustainability. I am going to talk about some solution sets that are possible. And I hope above all that you remain calm and cool. I just saw that Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was signed 250 years ago, is going to be 100 degrees. And because of the humidity, will feel like 116 degrees. So it's going to be difficult to march this July 4th. Anyway, I'm going to start sharing my screen, if I may, and hope that you can see it. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, great. Opportunities for carbon removal. And I am here because I have, a few years ago, participated in setting up an action team within Citizens Climate Lobby. I know that some of you are members. Um, and that is called the Greenhouse Gas Removal Action Team. And we meet monthly and we bring in experts from around the world and from, let's say, several political interests and economic interests and government interests into those meetings. And we have a whole bunch of recordings about the solution sets that I'm going to talk about. Okay, the question is, what motivates me and what motivates our greenhouse gas removal action team? Well, number one, science is our North Star. And the admonition from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the scientific community endorsed by governments, is that we must do both the reduction of emissions and removal of legacy greenhouse gas pollution. GHG, I'm going to use that phrase probably too much, greenhouse gas pollution. I'm also going to use the phrase CDR, which is carbon dioxide removal. They're essentially the same, except GHG takes in a broader range of greenhouse gases that are up there and beyond carbon dioxide, which is the most prevalent but not the most dangerous. Now, why, in addition, do we do it? Because, you know, why do we talk about reducing emissions? Why do so many environmental groups talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and switching to electric vehicles and solar, et cetera? It's about avoiding worst outcomes. Is that good enough? Let's make it not quite so bad as it is becoming. Is that a good enough solution? Is that inspirational enough? I think we can do better than that. And the legacy pollution that's up there, and by the way, carbon dioxide alone stays up for longer than a century once it's up there. That legacy pollution must also be removed to gain improved environmental health. This is the report of the IPCC from 2021, the last major report, and they concluded then that all pathways that could limit warming to 1.5 degrees C over the baseline year require carbon dioxide removal, not just reduction. And there is a wonderful fact sheet. By the way, I'm going to be sharing these slides, and there are several live links on here. And this fact sheet by the IPCC is 2 pages, which has a whole lot of the information that I'm going to be giving you today, bit by bit and live. Now let's play a kind of intellectual game here. Imagine that this ugly orange color is all the CO2 that we've been putting up there for approximately 160 years. That is the legacy pollution. And it is this number of 800 billion tons of excess CO2 is an underestimate. It's a deliberately shy underestimate. Some experts say it's really more like 1.5 trillion tons of excess CO2 that is currently in the atmosphere. But we don't want to exaggerate to try to make our points. And what amount do we put out annually? The in proportion to all of that legacy that is up there, the roughly 20 billion tons of net that we add annually is a much smaller issue. Now, why do I say net? Because every time that somebody emits carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, rather quickly oceans and forests and other absorbed about half of it. And annually, we in our globe are putting out about 40 billion tons of excess carbon dioxide. So about half of that is absorbed relatively quickly and quite naturally. But ironically, almost all of environmental groups around the world, including Citizens Climate Lobby for the last 16 years, have been focusing on the diminution of the annual, the little problem, not the big problem. But the big problem is what's causing disasters and creating over 425 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay, let's carry on this sort of intellectual game a little further and say, what if we succeed in removing? What will happen to all that cumulative legacy that's up there if we reduce annual emissions by 10% every year for 20 years? We have had a couple of years, particularly when COVID started, when we reduced in Europe and North America, we reduced the amount of emissions because people weren't going to work. The economy was down. And yet it wasn't quite 10%. But just imagine if we succeeded in having a really good success rate of reducing emissions annually by 10% every year for 20 years, what will happen? Well, this is roughly what will happen. The cumulative you see on the bar on the left, if it's only 800 billion tons, is what results in the 425 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere. And this is the little annual net emissions. Again, the 20 billion tons of net emissions. And you see that numbers are shrinking because if we reduce those emissions by 10% a year, we get down to something under 3 billion tons of annual emissions. That's an 86% reduction in 20 years. What success? Why not celebrate? Wouldn't that be great if we did that? But what happens to the legacy? The cumulative emissions will continue to go up by those smaller amounts, but it continues to go up. And it would take us 20% higher in average parts per million in the atmosphere, to over 500 parts per million in the atmosphere. Already, think of the storms, think of the heat, think of the drought, think of the amazing excess moisture in the atmosphere that is dumping so much rain and creating floods in various parts of the world already at 425 parts. What it will be like if the average is 500 parts per million. And by the way, subnote, when the average is 500 parts per million, cities, Los Angeles, Beijing, cities in the world will be averaging 700, 800, getting up into the territory where it really begins to interfere with clear thinking and other aspects of health diminution. So this is not a good solution. So what's the answer? The answer is we have to start reducing the legacy. pulling that out. That's the answer. Now, it's not just a matter of temperature increase, actually. There's also the fact of ocean acidification that is being created by the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the carbon dioxide, this is the chemical formula, adds up to excess hydrogen in the ocean. And that means problems with fish populations, problems with a number of different aspects of our global environment. And it's not just the acidification, it's also the temperature. Our oceans annually absorb about 90% of the excess heat that we're generating with the fossil fuels that we're putting up there. So the ocean is a giant battery. You've heard of the El Nino effect. This year is a major El Nino. That is because the Pacific has a huge amount of excess heat, and that's going to shape global temperatures and global storms and global weather for the entire year. So it's not just the chemistry that's bad, it's also the very fact of the heat that's bad. And it is hard to change these things. So we had better get on it. How do we get on it? Here we begin to look at some of the solution sets. Many people, when they think of removing carbon dioxide, they think of the Orca project in Iceland, which is large fans drawing air across a special sorbent that takes the CO2 out, and then they can put it directly into a basalt structure underneath the surface. They can power all of those fans and all of that chemistry and so forth with renewable energy, because that's what exists and predominates in Iceland. So it's very efficient there. But it would take more than 1 million such installations that are quite expensive to begin to make a dent in that annual level that we need to start reducing. Well, what else is there? There's use of biologic methods, that aging and putting spent corn stalks and various other things through a process, and then burying that. There's planting more trees, making forests bigger, but we don't have enough land area to make that really function and help us enough. Biochar is a fabulous newer invention. It's actually not a new invention, but it's newly expanded and developed. And biochar has been found, when it's added to agriculture, to increase the retention of moisture in the soil, and to increase the growth of the root stocks and the sequestration of carbon, therefore, into the soil, and it also boosts production of agriculture. Biochar is very exciting. It has several economic proponents in different parts of the world, particularly in California right at the moment. There's enhanced rock weathering. There's iron fertilization of parts of the ocean that have a shortage of iron in them. And as soon, within hours of putting iron dust in the blue pelagic eddies out in the middle of the oceans, microalgae bloom and it suddenly becomes green. And a good portion of that feeds fish and other animals, and another good portion of it falls to the bottom and sequesters that carbon at the bottom of the ocean. There are a variety of things underway with coastal carbon enhancement, and this is actually really exciting work, and off of the coast of California and also off of the Philippines, where people are farming, creating seaweed. You don't need to add water. You don't need to add fertilizer. You don't need to add anything. You just add sunshine and it grows very, very quickly. This is sort of a little image of a structure that takes that seaweed down during the night into cold waters where it's more fertile, and then brings it up during the day. It's an award-winning procedure, but mangroves and other coastal blue carbon retention is a very important thing to think about, and there's policy involved in that. So there's lots of different solutions, and here we'll get into a little bit deeper list of what those solutions are. This is kind of, in a way, the core of the what should create optimism in your thinking about this. It's carbon dioxide removal solutions include regenerative farming, urban greening, I mentioned biochar, biomass carbon removal and storage. That's the BECS that was in the earlier image. Direct air capture is one of the names for things that are done at the top of smokestacks. It's also what is the simple way of referring to that Orca project in Iceland. Um, Carbon can be mineralized, carbon dioxide can be mineralized into concrete, which is very exciting because concrete itself, the production of concrete, creates a huge amount of our excess carbon dioxide. And so locking it up inside concrete locks it up for as long as the building lasts, 200 years, whatever. Um, some of the walls that the Romans created have obviously now it's understood to have a lime addition to the mortar, which really is locking in carbon dioxide to that lime mortar, and they've lasted for 2,000 plus years. So, and directly adding powdered lime into rivers is being done by commercial interests in Canada and now in Maine, which enhances fish populations, reduces alkalinity of the rivers and the ocean, and has other benefits. So there are a variety of different things. We have a member of our steering committee is experimenting with putting basalt dust and olivine dust, adding it into soil, and actually precisely measuring the effects of those minerals naturally absorb carbon dioxide and then add to the beneficial aspects of soil growth. So those are experiments that are being developed and measured and moved along. And doing all of this means there'll be a ton of co-benefits, and that including increasing health. But all of these different co-benefits, if you can read that, really amount to restoration of the economy and restoration of the environment at the same time as those solutions are being advanced. So it's really kind of exciting. And because of these multiple co-benefits, including technology transfer and a variety of different things, there are agriculture, fishing, and other groups, including several Republican groups, that are in favor of these techniques and these developing and improving and scaling up these techniques. Okay, I'm going to do kind of a 60-second advertisement on Citizens Climate Lobby. Please forgive me for this, but I have to do it because I've been devoted to it since 2013. But the mission of this nonprofit is Citizens Climate Lobby empowers everyday people to bridge divides and bring political will for effective climate solutions in Congress. And that's what we've been doing steadily. And we do that with this is the phrase from Marshall Saunders, the founder in 2009. We're creating a peaceful army with respect and admiration, even for those with whom we disagree. And what happens with that peaceful army? This is the last time I was among the 1,000 people that went to Capitol Hill at 8 in the morning on a June morning. Very much not like the attack of the Capitol. This is a group that organizes people into groups of 5 to 8 and sets up individual meetings with senators and House members and their staffs. In one day, in the June of 2024, in one day, we had 442 separate such meetings on Capitol. Nobody else did this. Not the teachers, not the realtors, not the NRA, not anybody does this. Not the Sierra Club. Nobody does it. It is our way of making sure that we respectfully engage with our members of Congress. We have chapters in over 90% of the congressional districts across the country, and we are making steady advances in the conversations. And this year, CCL adopted 3 policy commitments. One, reduce emissions. This is what CCL's been doing since it was founded, primarily through the tax carbon idea, which economists think is the idea. and over 40 countries around the world have enacted because they know that it is the idea. The second is remove climate pollution. That's what we're about, in taking that legacy out of there, out of the atmosphere, and finally protect people, because any solution that we come up with needs to be respectful of all populations and all people and help people, not harm them. Okay, outside of far beyond Washington and far beyond CCL, there has been bipartisan support in Congress for carbon dioxide removal, and organizations out there working on carbon dioxide removal include not just the IPCC, but universities, Open Air Collective, Air Miners, Resources for the Future. Carbon 180 has a fabulous if you look up Carbon 180, you will see a framework for understanding this issue, and they have a long list of policies, national policies, that can help with reducing this problem. Clearpath.org is kind of a right-leaning nonprofit think tank, which is very much in favor of carbon dioxide removal solutions. The Global Carbon Project, as scientists are tracking the progress and trying to measure what we do and how well it's doing. The Sierra Club last year changed its policy in order to be supportive of greenhouse gas removal, because they have come to terms with the scientific evidence. And I could talk about more of these, but I'm going to move on. Out way beyond Washington, D.C. COP30, this is the conference of parties that assembled in Brazil last November, December, under the UN auspices. For the first time, they included a carbon dioxide removal pavilion of information in the blue zone, right tight around where all the senior leaders meet. And that resulted in more mainstream media coverage and more calls for governments to enact supportive policies. At the same time, business community is really picking up. Over 700 companies around the world are seeking ways to scale up carbon dioxide removal, apparently including Jenna Woodhill's husband is working on this thing, as best I understand. And it is a growing career opportunity that is understood to be probably within 10 years, $1 trillion business around the world. Okay, specific policies. The Rescue Oceans Act of 2026 is introduced both in the Senate and the House. It is backed by both Republicans and Democrats. It is about sponsoring research and development into marine carbon dioxide removal to enhance oceans' health and its ability to reduce carbon emissions. And by the way, also increase oxygen production. Do you know that half of all the oxygen that is created on planet Earth comes from the oceans because of healthy algae? This bill, Rescue Oceans Act, would invest in monitoring infrastructure and looking at the environmental effects, the outcomes, helping people, again, developing marine carbon dioxide removal standards and protocols, and make those findings all public. It's endorsed by these nonprofits, including Third Way, which is near and dear to several of us seniors. And this is a link to a press release on this bill. Now, the good new news. This is new news for those of you who have been with me in the SAFE advocacy team. Citizens Climate Lobby has had so far been hands off on this bill, but this last week, Citizens Climate Lobby decided to endorse the Rescue Oceans Act. Let me be completely clear. Not so as to make it a primary ask this July in our lobby meetings this July, or even a secondary ask, but to open it up for discussion, for review with staffs on Capitol Hill and elsewhere, and let folks know that it is something that CCL endorses. There's another brand new, and this Michelle and Jenna, is brand new, and just in the last few days, it's another bipartisan bill called the Methane Removal and Innovation Act. You see, it's HR 9478. I want to bring this to the attention of those of you who are in the advocacy team. This is also a bipartisan bill. It is so new that it has just been suggested for the first time yesterday to CCL as something to endorse. But why do it? Because methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and it's thought to be responsible for almost a third of all the global warming since we started measuring this and measuring progress in essentially in 2015. Methane is a very powerful, it's a shorter lived than carbon dioxide, shorter lived in the atmosphere, but it's many times more powerful as a greenhouse gas. And so pulling it out, if we can find ways to pull it out of the atmosphere, it will directly affect and improve the excess heat in the atmosphere. It is a very exciting area of research and development. There are a number of universities, a number of NGOs and corporates who are supportive of this and funding and overtly supporting and writing about this. It's already been referred to the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology just about 2 weeks ago. And the UN Secretary General has been stepping up commentary on this, that it is something we should be looking to do on an urgent basis. There's another bill that I'm not going to talk about very much, but I remember I mentioned mangroves and other coastal estuary blue carbon sinks. Very, very important in our ecology. It has a bipartisan collection of members of Congress who are a part of it. And you see there are a couple who are repeat offenders, members of Congress, who are also on the other bill on the Rescue Oceans Act. It would create research reserves. This bill has not yet been endorsed by CCL, but it follows straight along with CCL's healthy forest strategy and the need to reduce carbon. And we have proposed it in Maine to our Republican senator. And finally, I just wanted to say, remember, whenever you talk about this topic, I am not advocating, none of us is advocating that we do carbon dioxide removal instead of reducing emissions, instead of reducing pollution. It is a both and world. It is a both and strategy. Carbon dioxide removal isn't a substitute for deep emissions reductions. It isn't a substitute for implementing more renewable energy. It is an important tool that should be deployed in tandem with other mitigation methods. That is direct advice from the IPCC. And by the way, we've learned from the new chairman of the IPCC that the next annual report on the progress of climate work in 2028 will have a significant portion of it devoted to carbon dioxide removal and greenhouse gas removal strategies. So it is very much a part of the looking forward and going forward. If anybody wants to communicate with me, that is my email address. That's the best way to get to me. I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much.